Welcome to Moving Medicine, a podcast by the American Medical Association. Today's episode is part of the Cannabis Education Series brought to you by the AMA Cannabis Task Force. I'm Dr. Jesse Ehrenfeld, Senior Associate Dean, Tenured Professor of Anesthesiology, and Director of the Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin Endowment at the Medical College of Wisconsin. I'm also the immediate past president of the AMA and co-chair of the AMA Cannabis Task Force. Michael, take it away.
Thanks, Jesse. I'm Dr. Michael Sook, professor and chair of the Musculoskeletal Institute and the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at Geisinger Health System. I'm chair of the AMA Board of Trustees and your co-chair of the AMA Cannabis Task Force. Through expert discussions and insights, this podcast series features information that can help physicians of all specialties understand cannabis and the health effects of cannabis use.
The AMA forms mission-specific task forces like this one to tackle current medical issues in our nation. Make your voice heard by becoming a member today. Visit ama-assn.org/more. And now, on to the show. Michael.
Joining me today to talk about FDA-approved cannabis-related products is Dr. Randy Easterling. Dr. Easterling is past president of the Mississippi Medical Association and past president of the Mississippi Academy of Family Physicians. For 40 years, he's been practicing addiction medicine, including time as a medical director of an inpatient dependency unit. He has a master's in psychology and worked as an addiction counselor before his time in medical school. He's a fellow of the American Society of Addiction Medicine, went to medical school at the University of Mississippi, and did his family medicine residency at the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. Randy, it's really great to have you here today.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Sook. I appreciate being able to discuss this very timely topic. I would also like to say at this time that I applaud the American Medical Association for providing a platform to present recent evidence-based information concerning the use of cannabis for medicinal purposes. Thank you.
That's great, Randy. Thank you for that. And let me just start off with a quick question about your thoughts on what is the current state of the FDA and its approach to cannabis-related and cannabis-derived products?
Well, as I'm sure all of you know, the FDA has not approved the use of cannabis for the treatment of any disease or condition. For as long as I can remember, I assume over 40 years, the DEA has scheduled the cannabis sativa plant as a Schedule 1. There are currently 4 products that are approved that have been derived from or synthetically related to cannabis. The first is Epidiolex, which is a cannabinoid. There's approximately 119 to 125, depending on who you read, cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. Next is Marinol and Centros, which is dronabinol. Next is Sesamet, which is namanolone. I want to take a moment to look at how these products are similar and are dissimilar to the adult use products available in dispensaries. There's only one FDA-approved cannabis-derived product, and that's Epidiolex, which again is a cannabinoid. Epidiolex uses CBD that has very high purity, usually greater than 99%, which is unlikely to be true in consumer products. There are 3 synthetic cannabis-related drugs, Marinol that we mentioned earlier, which is dronabinol, and Centros, which is the liquid form of Marinol, which is a capsule, and also Sesamet, which is namanolone.
Thanks, Randy. And as we talk about these particular medications, maybe you can expand a little bit and talk about what FDA-approved uses that each of these have.
The FDA undergoes a rigorous process to determine safety and efficacy of medications for approval. The following FDA-approved uses have undergone this process, and we will discuss in a moment the FDA uses that have undergone this process. The level of evidence that is required for FDA-approved formulations is number 1, random double-blind trials, and number 2, must prove efficacy and safety. Some of the FDA-approved drugs, of course, are cannabinoid, which is used for pediatric epilepsy and other seizure disorders. Dronabinol, which is Marinol and Centros, and it's used FDA approved for loss of appetite secondary to AIDS. FDA approved for chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, refractory to other treatments. Also approved for postoperative nausea and vomiting. Now, nalaminone or Sesamet is FDA approved for chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting in patients who fail to adequately respond to other agents. Those with non-FDA approved uses have limited data for utilization. Drodamidol is used as a cancer-related loss of appetite. There's limited data comparing drodamidol to megestrol for loss of appetite. It's also used for spasticity and multiple sclerosis, and there's very few small case studies to support that. Nabilone is also used for nausea and vomiting related to AIDS, and there's a very limited data from a few case reports. It can also be used off-label or is used off-label for anxiety. There's only a single study with 5 patients that support that. Dystonia, there's a single small crossover study that explored this. Glaucoma, interesting enough, there's only a small study of 18 patients that showed potential for lowering intraocular pressure. It can also be used off-label for prophylaxis of postoperative nausea and vomiting.
Thanks, Dr. Easterling. And as we look at the ever-expanding scope of some of these things, maybe you can talk about the status of any products in the pipeline.
Well, it's important to point out that the regulatory environment, example, controlled substances and Schedule I status, has impacted the research, obviously, on cannabis. In order to study cannabis, there are 2 primary things that has to happen. Cannabis must be provided by NIDA from a single site, which is interesting enough, located at the University of Mississippi in Oxford. That's been run for over 40 years by Dr. Elsoy. Next, the researchers must register with the DEA. Current clinical trials ongoing for a variety of conditions. Tourette syndrome, motor neuron disease, long COVID, neuropathic pain, retinal degeneration, and there's up to 40 more additional studies being undertaken now.
Curated from more than 3,000 major newspapers, magazines, and journals, the AMA Morning Rounds newsletter delivers the top stories in healthcare right to your inbox, Monday through Friday. Subscribe today and check out all the AMA's free newsletters at ama-assn.org/myinbox. That's ama-assn.org/myinbox.
And as we all know, the FDA does more than just regulate specific medications. Are there other products that the FDA is looking at with regard to cannabis?
Yes, this is a rapidly evolving area where law and law enforcement don't always match. Per the FDA, it is illegal to sell THC or CBD containing food as it is an active ingredient in an approved medication. However, many consumer products for adult use come in the form of edibles, such as gummies.
Dr. Easterling, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge about FDA-approved cannabis-related and cannabis-derived products. Would you mind taking a moment to share a few take-home points that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Sure. I'd like to point out 3 things that are, I think, important and concerning to me. Presently, the cannabis plant, as we said earlier, is a Schedule I by the DEA, which severely limits adequate studies, which would, if they took place, hopefully substantiate legitimate medicinal uses for cannabis. The second thing is lack of evidence-based data opens the door to unfounded claims as to the actual medical benefit of cannabis. The third thing, and most importantly, is lack of FDA-required scientific studies results in very little information as to the potential harm when cannabis is released into the public under the guise of medicine, especially when it's given to children and adolescents, which of course we know will have a developing brain, and also to pregnant women. The position of the AMA in the past has been and still that cannabis should be studied.
Dr. Easterling, I want to thank you on behalf of the American Medical Association for joining us and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sook. It's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe to Moving Medicine on your favorite podcast platform. This content is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute medical or legal advice. The viewpoints expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the views and policies of the AMA unless otherwise indicated.
And this has been Moving Medicine. Thanks for listening.